In the name of Almighty God, I am Mahsa Sankoshi, and today I want to talk about vibrating particle in water. A vibrating particle in water can refer to either an actual water molecule undergoing internal vibrational modes, a suspended particle that is vibrating due to external forces like sound waves, or the motion of individual water particles around their equilibrium positions when a sound wave passes through the water. When particles are present in water and subjected to external vibrations, such as those from a submerged source, they can exhibit complex motion patterns, including moving towards areas of high vibration amplitude, a phenomenon observed in inverse Chladni patterns. And what about vibrating water molecules? The first concept is intrinsic vibrations. Water molecules or H2O naturally vibrate due to the movement of their oxygen and hydrogen atoms. These include symmetric and asymmetric stretching and bending modes. The next concept is vibrational energy transfer. When a water molecule vibrates, its hydrogen atoms can interact with neighboring water molecules, tugging them closer and then pushing them away, which influences the space between molecules. And what is about vibrating particles in a water medium? The name, the first concept is sound waves. Sound waves in water cause individual water particles to vibrate back and forth around their original position, but they don't travel with the wave. The next concept is suspended particles. When a solid particle is introduced into a vibrating water environment, it can be influenced by these vibrations. The next phase is invert Chladni patterns. Experiments with particles on a vibrating plate in water have shown that heavier particles tend to move to areas of high vibration amplitude, creating what are known as inverse Chladni patterns. And what about applications and observations? The first phrase is ice nucleation. In the case of water droplets, vibrations can transfer momentum between particles and the substrate, potentially triggering the formation of ice crystals. The next one is underwater noise effects. Understanding particle motion is crucial for assessing the impact of underwater sound on marine life, as many aquatic organisms are more sensitive to particle motion than to sound pressure alone. Acoustic, particle motion, and marine energy. Have you ever wondered how fishes and invertebrates hear, unlike mammals, which rely on changes in sound pressure to hear? Fishes and aquatic invertebrates hear by detecting acoustic particle motion as well as substrate vibration. Research on underwater noise from human activities has historically primarily focused on the impacts of noise on marine mammals. However, fishes and invertebrates play critical roles in ecosystems regarding biodiversity, food web dynamics, and human uses like commercial and subsistence fisheries that feed populations worldwide. According to Triton principal investigator and underwater acoustic research at Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, Queen Drew Axel PhD, if you want to understand noise effects on fishes and aquatic invertebrates, you have to consider acoustic particle motion and substrate vibration. The Department of Energy DOE Water Power Technologies Office or WPTO Triton Initiative aims to understand various environmental stresses associated with marine energy systems and their impacts on receptors, marine animals, and their ecosystems. Triton is conducting acoustic particle motion research to address knowledge gaps related to the potential impacts of marine energy generated underwater noise on fishes and invertebrates to better understand underwater noise effect for all species. Hearing using sound pressure versus particle motion. Underwater sound is characterized by two interrelated components: sound pressure and particle motion. Sound travels through water or any medium in the form of sound pressure waves. Individual water particles that interact with sound waves don't travel with the wave. Instead, the particles vibrate back and forth. As seen in the animation below, this is called particle motion. When these vibrations are generated through sediment, it is known as substrate vibration. Research has shown that all fishes detect particle motion, and the most aquatic invertebrates that detect sound also use particle motion rather than sound pressure. Proper and Hawkins, 2018. In addition to detecting particle motion in the water, sound detecting aquatic invertebrates and fishes that live near on or in the substrate are also likely to use their auditory systems to detect substrate vibration. Our understanding of fish hearing has benefited from decades of research by fish behaviorists and physiologists. Fish ears and related structures have been evolving for hundreds of millions of years. The ear in fish contains thousands or even tens of thousands of sensory hair cells, the same type of sensory cells found in our own ears. Each sensory cell in a fish ear has a tuft of silica, tiny hair-like structures projecting from its surface. These cilia are in contact with calcium carbonate structure. In most fishes, it is solid structure called an otolith or a gelatinous mass of calcium carbonate crystals called otoconia in some primitive fishes and in sharks and rays. The bodies of all fishes are roughly the same density as water and generally move with the motion of water particles. However, the otolithic or autoconial mass, which is about 3 times denser than the rest of the body, moves differently relative to surrounding tissues. This difference leads to the bending of the cilia, which simulates the sensory hair cells and sends signals to the brain through the nervous system. This direct ear stimulation enables fishes to hear and respond to sound in their environments. The otolith organs in fish ears act as a small accelerometer which sends and measures the three-dimensional vibration or motion of the water molecules. All fishes and sharks sense particle motion while only some fishes, but no sharks, can also detect sound pressure. And what about particle motion and marine energy? Marine energy is a type of ocean energy technology that generates electricity from waves, tides, ocean currents, and free-flowing rivers using many different types of devices. This industry has the potential to significantly contribute to global energy needs and is gaining recognition as a predictable and reliable form of renewable energy. However, before deploying these systems in ocean ecosystems, the marine energy industry and environmental research community are working to understand and proactively mitigate the potential environmental effects of these novel energy converters on fishes and aquatic invertebrates. Significant effort has gone into measuring sand pressure emissions and the effects associated with offshore energy devices deployed in marine ecosystems. However, since many marine animals use particle motion and substrate vibration by only measuring sound pressure exposure, there leaves a significant knowledge gap surrounding the effects of noise on a vast number of species. Moreover, it's not yet well understood whether sound pressure measurements can be converted to accurate estimates of acoustic particle motion in the shallow and bathymetrically complex environments typical of many ocean-based renewable energy sites. This is an active area of research acoustically are working to address. Like nearly all offshore industries and anthropogenic activities, an environmental stressor of interest for the marine energy community is the potential effects on underwater noise inputs on marine species. To date, sound measurements from the offshore sector have focused on understanding and evaluating the potential impacts of sound pressure on marine mammals. However, without an understanding of particle motion, the picture of underwater noise impacts of marine energy and other anthropogenic activities on aquatic life is incomplete, as fishes and invertebrates make up the greatest portion of marine animal biomass. Sound pressure is a scalar measurement, meaning it is described by just one value, its amplitude. On the other hand, particle motion is a vector quantity which includes both the direction and amplitude of the propagating acoustic energy. This means that while a single sound pressure measurement can only tell us how loud a record sound is, particle motion measurements also contain information about the direction of the sound source. The primary challenge between sound pressure and particle motion observations is partially due to the difference in access and use of technologies. Hydrophones are sensors that measure underwater acoustic pressure. There are also established methods and tools to collect, process, and analyze acoustic pressure data. Conversely, waterborne particle motion or vector field measurements are more complicated since, for example, they must measure motion on three axes, and there are only a handful of commercially available options for underwater vector sensors. Additionally, particle velocity or acceleration measurements require extra processing to drive bearing of sound source. Most importantly, in contrast to knowledge gained from studies of marine mammals' response to sound pressure, we have almost no baseline for how fishes and invertebrates respond to particle motion, let alone their sensitivity thresholds to these sounds. Understanding the way noise emissions impact fishes or invertebrates requires looking at these issues from the animal's perspective to understand which signals have the most significant impact on their lives. Triton roles in acoustic particle motion research. Triton research and development projects, including the Acoustic Particle Motion Project, conduct exploratory research necessary to address complex questions for the marine energy industry. Haxel, who has been studying underwater acoustics related to marine energy for over a decade, investigates ways to improve the characterization of underwater sound emissions and helps inform appropriate international standards for the industry. For several years, Haxel has advocated for more research and attention on particle motion and substrate vibration to holistically address underwater noise effects for all species. To tackle this multidisciplinary work, he has partnered with an experienced team of fish biologists, physics, engineers, regulators, and acousticians. Triton's Acoustic Particle Motion project began in 2022 with a workshop that convened marine resource management regulators, researchers, engineers, industry subject matter experts, and academic leaders in underwater acoustic and fish physiology, including Arthur Popper he is professor emeritus of biology at University of Maryland, College Park, and a key partner to Haxel throughout the project. Popper's understanding of particle motion, fishes, and invertebrates has come from decades of research and scientific inquiry. At the meeting, he presented to a room full of researchers, regulators, and practitioners to make the case that particle motion was a worthy topic to tackle for the marine energy industry. The 2022 workshop helped ignite meaningful discussions about particle motion. Research needs to fully address regulatory concerns related to underwater noise impacts. Following the workshop, Popper and Haxel and colleagues wrote a perspective paper from the workshop findings. In this paper, marine energy converters, potential acoustic effects on fishes and aquatic invertebrates. The authors provide an analysis of major data gaps in the understanding of acoustic particle motion from marine energy converters and the possible effects of anthropogenic particle motion on aquatic life forms. The publication provided a necessary foundation to help bolster recommendations for research and future efforts. These conversations piqued the interest of both WPTO and the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management or BOEM, an agency equally dedicated to understanding the impacts of the development of renewable energy systems in U.S. water. From them, Triton's Acoustic Particle Motion Project was born. Shane Gown, a PhD from BOEM Environmental Studies Program, a co-author in the workshop paper referenced above, has become a key partner in the project with expertise in marine acoustics and substrate vibration. According to Guan, results from this study would provide valuable knowledge to BOEM for science-informed decision-making and environmental impact assessment when planning offshore renewable energy development. Complex question and complex approach. Like most questions involving ocean processes and ecosystems, developing an understanding of the potential environmental effects of acoustic particle motion and substrate vibrational is not straightforward. Researchers can measure particle motion in two ways: estimating particle motion based on sound pressure measurements or using vector sensors that make direct measurements. In deep open water environments away from the sea surface and ocean bottom, particle motion can be calculated from sound pressure measurements if the water density and underwater speed of sound, two parameters that are easy to measure, are known. However, as sound propagates in coastal environments, it reflects off the water surface, the seafloor, and other objects in the water column like reefs or offshore infrastructure. These boundary conditions complicate the relationship between particle motion and sound pressure in shallow or bathymetrically complex environments. Because marine energy is often deployed in shallow waters, research investigating this relationship requires independent measurements of both sound pressure and particle motion to better understand how to best monitor these sound types and gain a better understanding of the potential environmental effects of acoustic emissions for all species. At the start of the project, Haxel and Teton team worked with industry patents as JOSCO applied scientists and at Geo-Spectrum Technologies to integrate and test a portable battery-operated instrument package with both a particle motion sensor and hydrophone. The package includes three-axis accelerometer-based sensors and a reference sound pressure hydrophone to provide comprehensive and independent assessments of both sound pressure and particle motion at a given deployment site. This instrument, called a Vector Sensor Hydrophone or VSH, was field tested in Esquimalt Bay, Washington using an acoustic projector. The projector is a calibrated sound source that generates signals at user-specified frequencies and amplitudes. This simulation simulates a small vibrating hemispherical particle in water. The particle has a radius of 1 millimeter and is oscillating in the axial direction at a frequency of 50 kHz. The vibration induces acoustic waves in the fluid. This example demonstrates how to set up a thermoviscous acoustic model that solves for the acoustic compressible waves in the fluid. The numerical solution is validated by comparison to an analytical solution for the particle oscillating along the polar axis. Thank you so much for watching my video until the end. Here you can see the COMSOL simulation for vibrating particle water for hemispherical and it's half of the circle. And you can see that I have used the pressure acoustic frequency domain as a physical module and also thermoviscous acoustic frequency domain. And you can see that the results as instances, local velocity, and acoustic pressure here.